Tomorrow I die. Today I would unburthen my soul. My immediate purpose is to tell you plainly and succinctly a series of mere household events. In their consequence, these events have terrified, have tortured, have destroyed me, yet I will not attempt to expound them. Later, perhaps, some intellect more calm, more logical than my own will perceive these circumstances as little more than ordinary and commonplace. For me, they have presented little but horror. From my infancy, I was noted for the docility and humanity of my disposition. My tenderness of heart was even so conspicuous as to make me the jest of my companions. I was especially fond of animals, and was never so happy as when feeding and caressing them. I married early and was happy to find in my wife a disposition not uncongenial with my own. Observing my partiality for domestic pets, she lost no opportunity of procuring those of the most agreeable kind. We had birds, goldfish, a fine dog, rabbits, a small monkey, and a cat. This latter was a remarkably large and beautiful animal, entirely black and sagacious to an astonishing degree. Speaking of his intelligence, my wife, who at heart was not a little tinctured with superstition, regarded all black cats as witches in disguise. Not that she was ever serious upon the point. I mention the matter for no better reason than it happens just now to be remembered. Pluto, this was the cat's name, was my favorite pet and playmate. I alone fed him, and he attended me wherever I went about the house. It was even with some difficulty that I could prevent him from following me through the streets. Our friendship lasted in this manner for several years, during which my general temperament and character experienced a radical alteration for the worse. I grew day by day more moody, more irritable, more regardless of the feelings of others. I suffered myself to use intemperate language to my wife. At length, I even offered her personal violence. My pets, of course, were made to feel the change in my disposition. I not only neglected, but ill-used them. For Pluto, however, I still retained sufficient regard to restrain me from maltreating him, as I made no scruple of maltreating the rabbits, the monkey, or even the dog, when, by accident or through affection, they came in my way. But my disease grew upon me, for what disease is like alcohol? And at length, even Pluto was made to feel the effects of my ill temper. One night, returning home much intoxicated, I fancied that the cat avoided my presence. I seized it, when, in its fright at my sudden violence, it inflicted a slight wound upon my hand with its teeth. The fury of a demon instantly possessed me. I knew myself no longer. My original soul seemed at once to take its flight from my body, and a fiendish malevolence, gin-nurtured, thrilled every fibre of my frame. I took from my waistcoat pocket a penknife, opened it, grasped the poor beast by the throat, and deliberately cut one of its eyes from the socket. When reason returned with the morning, I experienced a sentiment half of horror, half of remorse for the crime of which I had been guilty, but it was at best a feeble and equivocal feeling, and the soul remained untouched. I again plunged into excess and soon drowned in wine all memory of the deed. In the meantime, the cat slowly recovered. The socket of the lost eye presented it as true, frightful appearance, but he no longer appeared to suffer any pain. He went about the house as usual, but fled in extreme terror of my approach. I had so much of my old heart left as to be, at first, grieved by this evident dislike on the part of a creature which had once so loved me. But this feeling soon gave way to irritation, and then came, as if to my final and irrevocable overthrow, the spirit of perverseness. morning, in cool blood, I slipped a noose about its neck and hung it to the limb of a tree. Hung it with the tears streaming from my eyes and with the bitterest remorse at heart. Hung it because I knew that it had loved me and because I felt it had given me no reason of offense. Hung it because I knew that in so doing I was committing a sin. A deadly sin that would so jeopardize my immortal soul as to place it, if such a thing were possible, even beyond the reach of the infinite mercy of the most merciful and most terrible God. That very night I was aroused from sleep by the cry of fire. The whole house was blazing. My wife, a servant, and I made our escape, but the destruction was complete. My entire worldly wealth was swallowed up, and I resigned myself to despair. On the day succeeding the fire, I visited the ruins. The walls, with one exception, had fallen in. About this wall, a dense crowd were collected. Strange. Scorched into the plaster. It's impossible. I saw the creature hanging from a tree. Its neck was broken. There was a noose around its neck, but it's burned into the wall. It was dead, I tell you. Dead. Its neck was killed the beast. For months, I could not rid myself of the phantasm of the cat. I went so far as to regret the loss of the animal, and to look about me among the vile haunts which are now habitually frequented for another pet of the same species with which to supply its place. One night, as I sat half stupefied in a den of more than infamy, my attention was suddenly drawn to some black object reposing upon a hogshead of rum. I approached it. It was a black cat. A very large one, fully as large as Pluto and closely resembling him in every respect but one. This cat had a large, although indefinite, splotch of white covering nearly the whole region of the breast. Upon my touching him, he immediately arose, purred loudly, rubbed against my hand, and appeared delighted with my notice. I continued my caresses. When I prepared to go home, the animal evinced a disposition to accompany me. I permitted it to do so. Upon reaching my house, it domesticated itself at once and became an immediate favorite with my wife. For my own part, I soon found a dislike to it arising within me. This was just the reverse of what I had anticipated. Its evident fondness for myself rather disgusted and annoyed. What added, no doubt, to my growing hatred of the beast was the discovery that, like Pluto, it too had been deprived of one of its eyes. With my aversion to this cat, however, its partiality for myself seemed to increase. Whenever I sat, it would crouch beneath my chair or spring upon my knees, covering me with its loathsome caresses. If I arose to walk, it would get between my feet and thus nearly throw me down. Or, fastening its long, sharp claws in my dress, clambered on my breast. At such times, though I longed to destroy it with a blow, I was yet withheld from doing so, partly by the memory of my former crime, but chiefly, let me confess it, by absolute dread of the beast. I am almost ashamed to own that the terror and horror with which the animal had inspired me had been heightened by one of the merest chimeras it would be possible to imagine. My wife had drawn my attention more than once to the mark of white hair, which constituted the sole visible difference between the strange creature and the one I had destroyed. This mark had been indefinite, but by slow degrees it had assumed rigorous distinctness of outline. It was now the representation of an object which I shudder to name, and for this I would have rid myself of the monster had I dared. It was now the image of a hideous, of a ghastly thing. Of the gallows! Oh, mournful and terrible engine of horror and of crime, of agony and of death. Neither by day nor by night knew I the blessing of rest anymore. During the former, the creature left me with no moment alone, and in the latter I started hourly from dreams of unutterable fear to find the hot breath of the thing upon my face. This vast weight and incarnate nightmare which I had no power to shake off incumbent eternally upon my heart. The moodiness of my usual temper increased to hatred of all things and of all mankind, while from the sudden and ungovernable outbursts of fury to which I now blindly abandoned myself, uncomplaining wife, alas, was the most usual and the most patient of sufferers. One day she accompanied me upon some household errand into the cellar of the house. The cat followed me, getting between my feet, throwing me headlong, exasperating me to madness. Uplifting an axe, I aimed a blow at the animal. This blow was arrested by the hand of my wife. Goaded by the interference to a rage more than demoniacal, I buried the axe in her brain. She fell dead upon the spot without a groan. This hideous murder accomplished, I set myself forthwith and with entire deliberation to the task of concealing the body. I knew I could not remove it from the house, either by day or by night, without the risk of being observed by the neighbors. Many projects entered my mind. At one period, I thought of cutting the corpse into minute fragments and destroying them by fire. At another, I deliberated about packing it into a box as if merchandise, with the usual arrangements, and so getting a porter to take it from the house. Finally, I hit upon what I considered to be a far better expedient than either of these. I determined to wall it up in the cellar, as the monks of the Middle Ages are recorded to have walled up their victims. By means of a crowbar, I easily dislodged the bricks, and having carefully deposited the body against the inner wall, I propped it in that position, while with little trouble I relaid the whole structure as it originally stood. I looked around triumphantly and said to myself, here at least, then, my labor has not been in vain. My next step was to look for the beast which had been the cause of so much wretchedness, for I had firmly resolved to put it to death. It appeared that the crafty animal had been alarmed at the violence of my previous anger and forbore to present itself in my present mood. It is impossible to describe the deep and blissful sense of relief which the absence of the detested creature occasioned in my bosom. It did not make its appearance during the night, and thus, for one night at least, I soundly and tranquilly slept. I slept, even with the burden of murder upon my soul. The second and third night passed, and still my tormentor came not. The monster in terror had fled. I should behold it no more. My happiness was supreme. The guilt of my dark deed disturbed me but little. Some few inquiries had been made, but these had been readily answered. I looked upon my future felicity as secured. Upon the fourth day of the assassination, a party of police came very unexpectedly into the house and proceeded to make rigorous investigation of the premises. They left no nook or corner unexplored. For the third or fourth time, they descended into the cellar. I quivered not in a muscle. My heart beat calmly. I folded my arms upon my bosom and roamed easily to and fro. The police were thoroughly satisfied and prepared to depart. The glee at my heart was too strong to be restrained. I burned to say if but one word by way of triumph, and to render doubly sure their assurance of my guiltlessness. Gentlemen, I delight to have allayed your suspicions. I wish you all health. A little more courtesy. By the by, gentlemen, this is a very well-constructed house. In the rapid desire to say something easily, I scarcely knew what I uttered at all. These walls are solidly put together. And here, through the mere frenzy of bravado, I rapped heavily upon the brickwork behind which stood the corpse of my wife. No sooner had the blow sunk into silence than I was answered by a cry from within the tomb. For one instant, the party upon the stairs remained motionless. through the extremity of terror and of awe. In the next, a dozen arms were toiling at the wall. The corpse stood erect before the eyes of the spectators. Behind its head sat the hideous beast whose inhuman cry had condemned me. God, shield and deliver me from the fangs of the archfiend! I had walled the monster up within the tomb.